I'm not one to really give out cool raffle prizes. If you're a tech and you do the type of tech work that I do, it is oftentimes not in your best interest financially to do a raffle prize. But I did one for Zulu's last anniversary because I've been located here at Zulu 24 for a few years now, and I really do have to attribute a lot of my business's current success so far to the patrons of Zulu 24, so I wanted to give something really cool out. The prize for this raffle was a custom AntTech build from the ground up, built off of a brand new replica with a $1,500 budget, and a really cool young man won that prize, and he's very appreciative of it. Again, very cool young man. And what he wanted was a Scar H. So I'm going to walk you through the brushless VFC Scar H that we built for him, and more significantly, the hop-up conversion kit that I made for this gun that lets us use a hop-up that doesn't suck. So let's talk about that parts list really quick. Of course, the base gun is a brand new VFC Scar H, and I mentioned that this would be a brushless build, and we are using the Solink V5 brushless motor. And internally, we have a full retro arms gearbox put together, pretty much on spec with pretty much all of the other brushless builds that I do that you might see me post on Instagram. So we got a retro arm shell, J-cage bearings. In this case, we're using the Prometheus multi-fit bearings, mainly because they're thinner and they don't get in the way of the selector plate. And I like that a lot, especially since we have a very weird proprietary selector plate. We have Rocket 1801 gears. The main reason for going 1801 instead of 1301 is that this young man is unsure what his playstyle is right now, and he was really feeling a DMR initially, but that would put him at a disadvantage playing here because there's a 100-foot minimum engagement distance for DMRs. And since he's still fairly new to the sport, I figured let's keep it a blue tag, which is a 10-foot med, not a DMR, and he'll play with it like that. And if he wants to go green tag or red tag, we'll have a lot of wiggle room to play with that afterwards. And while brushless motors are very efficient, 1801 gears are really going to help us have that leverage if we go that DMR route. And the brushless motor being the Solink V5, we can crank that bad boy up to like 46K. 46K with 1801 gears is going to get you pretty much the same trigger response and rate of fire that you would get with 1301 gears and like a 30 or 33K brushless motor. We have the Jeftron Sela in here, mainly because I wanted to put some of the budget towards some more important parts in the build, and we don't really need all the crazy advanced features of the Leviathan for this gun's sake. And the Sela, or the Sela, however it's pronounced, it's going to give us a much easier time using the proprietary Scar trigger that is meant to go in this gun. I'm going to rattle off the rest of those parts. We got a retro arms tappet plate. We have the EPES nozzle, Scar length, supposedly, but if you know, you know. You always have to make things fit. Retro arms piston, ASG palm piston head, a garter ported cylinder, an ASG cylinder head, garter SP120 spring, and the super ultra
heavy
research and development involved
tappet plate spring. And I totally didn't just buy in bulk from McMaster-Carr and rebrand it. And then we got this whole thing going on. So this is a conversion kit for the Scar H that lets us use a Maxx MTW style hop-up. This does involve a modification to the lower receiver that I will show you, as well as a couple of 3D printed parts. We're using the MGW meaning that it's going to take a gas blowback bucking and barrel. See my range test video with the M4G setup. You can watch my M4G installation video if you have any questions or you want to know more about these M4G or MGW hop-up setups. Externally, we're kind of going the PTS route a little bit, going with that EPGC, which was modified extensively to work for the Scar, and I'll show you how I did that. And then we have the MREX handguard because it actually weighs less than the original RIS hardware on the gun, and the raffle winner is young. I figured I'd give him a little bit less weight on the front end, plus something that looks a little bit cooler, and he's all for it. I was able to squeeze a mid-cap into this build, and really fortunately, another one of my customers happened to have a whole bunch of other used Scar mid-caps, and he just gave these to me for free to give to this raffle winner, just in good spirit. So kudos to him. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. And so does the raffle winner. So let's start off with some of the small niche mods, and then we'll move on to this hop-up conversion kit. Let's start with the PTS grip. So an M4 AEG grip is not the same as a SCAR AEG grip. Here's an OEM VFC M4 grip, and here's a OEM VFC SCAR grip. Now, the main difference between these two grips is just how much material we have up here. So what I did was I made a jig, and this jig would fit here inside the SCAR grip, and it would bottom out, and it would match the profile of these surfaces. And then when it's placed inside of an M4 grip, it'll obviously sit a lot deeper, and I know exactly what I need to sand off. So we did that for this PTS grip. We know exactly what we had to remove. Another small mod I think is worth mentioning is the fact that oftentimes when you get these VFC scars, when your mock bolt is all the way forward, there's like some wiggle room up front where when it goes all the way forward, it can kind of rattle around back and forth. So I made just a brass spacer that goes inside of the mock bolt just to basically take up that empty space. So now when this mock bolt is all the way forward, it is all the way forward. I am a big sucker for rear alignment spacers for any version 2 RetroArms gearbox build I'm doing. So I made one specifically for the SCAR. It does sit into the RetroArms spring guide. And what it does is it fills the space between the back of the gearbox and this back plate. This is one of the few things actually holding this gearbox in the lower receiver. So I figured it was worth giving a little bit more attention to it, just to make sure that everything is fitting nice. Looking at the lower receiver, I did have to modify this little edge here. I had to put a chamfer on it because there's a pretty extreme radius here on the RetroArm shell, and the corner of this surface was just hitting the inside of this radius, and it was causing the gearbox shell to sit at a weird tilted angle. So by putting that chamfer there, it allows this guy to sit in there nice and aligned. The stock. So VFC scars come with these hinge connectors that connect your wires together. So you have wires inside of the lower receiver that kind of just stick out, and then they touch these two metal pads, which are then connected to the wires in this hinge. The problem with the hinge connection is, well, it's this.
This is why the hinge circuit must always be redacted. No good. Gotta go. We're making holes.
And that we did. We made holes. So there's a hole going through the back here. There's a hole going through the back here. That'll let us fit a DIN connector in there. And then I started making a hole that could be big enough to fit a DIN connector in through here, but I was not comfortable with how much material I was taking out, so I just stopped. And what's going to end up happening is I'm going to desolder the DINs, and then I'll resolder them once I actually route the wires through here. Now let's talk about this hop-up conversion kit. So the lower receiver has this 3D printed part here. I have another one of these that is the same exact part pretty much, minus these fins on the side. And this gives me a flat surface to use as a guide when I use my Dremel to Dremel down the feed tube that is sticking up inside the lower receiver. So that allows this to be a nice, flush, flat surface for our MTW style hop-up to sit on top of. The purpose of these wings is to prevent the hop-up from being able to like rotate in any dramatic way, and it also creates a constraint that does not let this hop-up get pushed away far enough such that the hole for this feed tube and the hole inside the hop-up get misaligned and cause feeding issues. Realistically though, with the O-rings up front here, the whole outer barrel assembly is going to be pushing this hop-up firmly against the front of this spacer that I had to print to replace the OEM spacer, which is in turn going to be pressed firmly up against the front of the gearbox shell. Now, this spacer has an inlet that is appropriately sized to fit snug in that retro arms gearbox shell, and the front hole is sized appropriately so that our Maxx hops inlet fits snug into that. And that's going to help ensure that we have good nozzle alignment. Nozzle alignment is something that can easily get messed up when you have a very long nozzle. The EPES nozzle has two spaced out O-rings which really help keep the nozzle stable, and it's on a retro arms tappet plate, which is a perfect, snug, tight fit. Despite that, because the nozzle is so long, any amount of wiggle that is going to exist is going to be even more extreme at the tip of the nozzle because of how leverage and torque work. When doing this hop-up conversion, it was really important that I carefully shim the inlet adapter with the shims provided in the hop-up, so that I know that this is appropriately spaced relative to the nozzle. And what do I mean by that? I have to make sure that when the nozzle's all the way forward, that we're making a full seal, and we are. And I also have to make sure that when the nozzle is retracted all the way back, because the tappet plate is retracted all the way back, I have to make sure that the nozzle is not in the way and doesn't obstruct BBs from getting inside of there. So while this is a conversion kit, because of the extensive mods that have to be done to the receiver, and I consider this an extensive mod, mainly because this flat surface has to be very precisely done, and I did this by hand with the Dremel, and a younger me would not have the same finesse that I have now, and I know a lot of people wouldn't have that same finesse. And also, it's not really just drop in, because like you are going to be shimming your inlet adapter, and you do have to carefully understand the relationship between your nozzle, tappet plate, gearbox shell, your bucking, and all of that stuff. You know, all these things still need to be fine-tuned so that everything performs properly. So the conversion kit alone is not enough. You have to install it with a very high level of scrutiny. Another really important thing to note with this hop-up conversion kit is that your whole assembly and disassembly process is now a lot more difficult than it was out of the box. The SCAR out of the box is actually really easy to field strip, but the drawback is that the hop-up chamber design, insofar as how it's incorporated into the gun, it really suffers, and it's not ideal. The original hop-up design is contingent upon the hop-up being able to easily spring away from the gearbox, which is not great when you're trying to keep that hop-up chamber firmly pressed up against your gearbox so that you have good air seal between your nozzle and bucking. The original SCAR hop-up also doesn't have an inlet adapter, and that can also be said for the Maxx model SCAR hop-up. While it's a better hop-up than the OEM one, it doesn't change the way that the hop-up is, again, incorporated into the gun. So we definitely have a much better system now, and it's worth the extra work that is involved in taking this apart and putting it back together, and now you're going to watch me put it back together. Most people work on SCARs and then quit teching forever, mainly because of the ambidextrous selector. And there's a little trick to it. So I'm going to start like this. Don't worry about this guy, we'll get to this guy. What's going to change for this is that we want to get all of this front end stuff on now. Being very mindful of our wires, like so. Getting that front pin in. So now we have this first half of the ambi selector put in. When it comes to the second gear, the trick that the pioneers use is we're actually going to use a screwdriver. We're going to gently flex our plastic receiver. So that we can push this guy down, and it's very important that the lines notched into these gears line up with one another. like so. So now we got the ambi in. And then you want to like immediately get these suckers on. We have our selector switches. The ball bearing gets a lot of people. Got to be careful. And you don't want to push down all the way on the selector switch, because then it'll rub on the receiver and it'll make your selector switches not rotate as smoothly. So I like to get them on, and then I like to feel what that selector switch is feeling like. And then if I have to create more space between the switch and the receiver, Now, like many ambidextrous selector setups, when you rotate one on one side, it doesn't always translate well to the opposite side. The only gun that I think actually does that really well is, or rather the only company that I think that does that well is KWA. Their ambi selectors are very solid. Let's get our grip on. Okay, from here, I can install that 3D printed spacer in the back. It fits right into the spring guide. That's going to help prevent the spring guide from popping out and rotating. This screw is very important. This is going to actually hold our spring guide steady so that it's not wibbity-wobbity. We got our mag catch. The mag catch actually plays a pretty important role in helping to keep the gearbox shell in the lower receiver. It's a very tight fit for that reason. And then the screw on the bottom that goes into this spacer is replaced with a much more coarse screw that's going to thread well into plastic, which that new part is made out of. So now with our receiver, I want to make sure that the stock is on, because these two holes need to line up in order for me to get those wires through there. And as you can see, the spacer that I made, that little brass spacer, it gets rid of that like ½ an inch of free play that that bolt had. Now it's very nice. And now the tricky part. So I'm going to get this inserted into the receiver up here, and then I'm going to slide it back into the stock. You see the wider opening here for this trunnion area. Now with that in, I'm going to be careful I'm not snagging these screws. This will slide back like so. And then we can screw these in. This front piece for the MREX handguard is going to go in. All right. Then our outer barrel slides on. But it won't slide on all the way because these two side screws actually go into that outer barrel as well. So as you can see, the outer barrel, it doesn't go into the outer barrel, but it gets stopped by the outer barrel. So we'll wait to put those last two in. And then, because I have O-rings on here, I have to squish this outer barrel on so that when I put this handguard on, which slides on like so. There's this long screw. This long screw threads into the outer barrel. Then we have these two screws that go on the side. So we have more mounting clampage going on. We have a very solid front end because of all those screws. I can put the motor in. Oh, let me test fire it. Well, there you have it. That's the VFC Scar H brushless build for the raffle winner of the last Zulu 24 anniversary. Challenging build, to be honest with you, when all was said and done. If we were to factor in the labor that I would be okay with charging if I were to do this again, we definitely went over budget. But I'm glad that the gun came out the way that it did. It shoots phenomenally well. The range is excellent. And this thing's good to go. It's the nicest shooting VFC Scar that I've ever shot. Probably because we're not using their curse top-ups. With all the mid-caps that he has, if you can just get a red dot on this thing or something, you'll be good to go. You'll be able to play with this thing and have a real competitive edge over most other people. And I gotta say, on another note, this gun has really reignited a flame that I have for the Scar H, and I think I'm going to use it more in video games.
That's the look of our target right now. We do not want to kill Epstein. We're gonna try to take him alive. Oh. If you need. Feed back in. Oh my god.
So yeah, that's all I got for this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Definitely subscribe. I have some videos with more views than subscribers, and a lot of good feedback and positive comments on it. So if you like that type of content, or this type of content, subscribe, because I plan on making more of it. What was missing in this video that you would have loved to see? I'll keep that in mind for the next time I do a little build highlight. But it's time to circle this back around to the end. That's all I got for this video, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Thank you for watching. Good night. God bless. I'm out.